people who exhibit high willpower, who appear on the surface to have a great deal of willpower, the primary thing that is different between them and people who appear to have low levels of willpower is that they are in environments where they are tempted less. So their environment is primed for them to be high willpower. Okay. And I think that alone should inform a lot of your strategy. Again, how do we stack the deck in your favor? How do you design an environment where you don't need to be a superhero just to get something done? You know, like if you're constantly putting yourself in a tough position where you're fighting against the friction of the environment you're in, it's almost like a form of gravity. You know, it sort of pulls you toward it.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Excited to talk to this gentleman today because his work's fascinated me for a long time. The reason his work has fascinated me for so long, I went through this string for a while where so many what I'd call high-performing, successful friends of mine would say, have you read Atomic Habits? Have you read Atomic Habits? I'm talking about athletes, business people, entertainers, and I'm like, the heck is Atomic Habits? And I finally find out there's this guy, James Clear. Turns out he's written this book, like 5 million people have bought it. And I'm like, well, why have 5 million people read this book on habits? Because you know you're supposed to have them. And then I read it. I'm like, it's not one of these like have a habit book. It's like how your brain works, how to create habits, how to eliminate bad ones, and physically why in your brain you can do these things and why it's so necessary. So I've wanted James on for a long time. We finally put it together. I'm so grateful to share him with all of you today. So James Clear, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Great to talk to you.
Yeah. And I don't want to just talk habits today. I'm going to talk about some of your productivity hacks as well.
Sure.
Your work, bro, is I think I'd call it groundbreaking because I don't think anybody's really approached habits the way that you have. But let's back up a little bit just for a second, because I think it's important for people to understand this concept you teach that, you know, everyone's always talking about taking massive action. You got to take massive action towards what you want. And you're like, yeah, you should do that. But your concept of getting 1% better is much more believable for most people. And so just address that for a second. Why 1% better every day, and how does a habit do that?
Sure. So first of all, I think there's no reason that you can't be really ambitious, right? Like I consider myself to be a very ambitious person. I think it's just that you're oscillating or switching between these two modes. You know, like when you're in planning mode, when you're in strategy mode, sure, you can be very ambitious and be very aggressive and, stretching yourself and reaching. But when it comes time to take action and execute, you have to scale it down to something that you can achieve that day. You know, like in one sense, the biggest unit of time you could ever do something is about a single day, because then you got to go to sleep, you know, and then you have to wake up again and do it the next day. So unless you're playing, you know, at some point there's a limit. You can only stay up for 48 hours or 72 hours, like, you know, and then you break. So that's the largest possible unit that you could ever do a single thing in. And I think more realistically, most of the time, the truth is, you know, you got about an hour, or maybe you got 2 hours to work on this, and then you got to go move on to something else. So we don't have big chunks of time available to us. We need to scale things down into pieces that we can actually work on and execute. So the way that I think about it is, when making plans, think big. When making progress, think small. And getting 1% better each day is a way to encourage that. The story that I like to tell, and this is something that I kind of kick Atomic Habits off with, is the story of the British cycling team. And, for many years, British cycling was very mediocre. They had never won a Tour de France, which is the premier race in cycling. They had won a single gold medal over like 100-year span. And they brought this new performance coach in named Dave Brailsford. And he had this concept that he called the aggregation of marginal gains. The aggregation of marginal gains. And the way that he described it was the 1% improvement in nearly everything that we do related to cycling. So they started looking at a bunch of things you would expect a cycling team to focus on. Like they put slightly lighter tires on the bike, or they designed like an ergonomic seat for the riders. They had the riders wear a little feedback sensor, little chip to see how each individual responded to training. Then they would adjust the practice schedule. But then they started doing like these little 1% changes, these small improvements that nobody else was really thinking about. Like they hired a surgeon to come in and teach the riders how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of catching a cold or getting the flu. They have this big trailer, like a semi-trailer that carries a lot of bikes in it to major events. And they painted the inside of that truck trailer white so that they could spot little bits of dirt and dust.
Yo, what's up, Dick? Thanks, man, for being here.
Performance of the bikes. They have two different types of fabrics. They've got like indoor racing suits and
Was that
outdoor
Kirby?
racing suits,
What's up, man?
and they tested those fabrics
Yo,
in a wind tunnel.
nice song,
They
man.
found out
Nice,
that the indoor
nice
fabric
cover.
was lighter and more aerodynamic.
Nice remix too,
They
buddy.
asked all of their riders to wear that fabric. They even had all their
See the reflection
different
of
riders
my
test,
power
like a bunch
tower
of, like maybe a dozen
in
different
the
types
window.
of pillows, and then they see which one led to the best night's sleep for each person. And then once they figured that out, they brought that on the road with them to hotels for the Tour de France and so on.
Nice, buddy. That's glad. I'm
And,
so glad.
You
You
know,
walked
Railsford
so
said something like,
friggin'
we
far.
can actually do this, right? We can actually make all these 1% improvements related to cycling. Then I think we can win a Tour de France within 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won the Tour de France in 3 years, and then they repeated again the fourth year with a different rider. And then after a 1 year break, they won 3 more in a row. So after having never won for like 110 years, you know, they win 5 of the next 6. And I like to use that story as an introduction to this idea of getting a little bit better, making these 1% improvements for a couple of reasons. The first is it shows you that excellence, a lot of the time, maybe we could even say most of the time, is not actually about radical change. It's about a commitment to accruing small improvements day in and day out. Secondly, and I think this is also crucial, it encourages you to focus on trajectory rather than position. Right? There's a lot of discussion about position in life. How much money is in the bank account? What is the number on the scale? What is the current stock price? What are the quarterly earnings? There's all this measurement around our current position. But what getting 1% better each day encourages is to focus on your trajectory instead. Am I getting better? Is the arrow pointed up and to the right, or have we flatlined? Am I getting 1% better or 1% worse? Because if you're on a good trajectory, all you need is time. Right? If you have good habits, time becomes your ally. You just need to let time work for you. But if you have bad habits, time becomes your enemy. And every day that clicks by, you kind of dig the hole a little bit deeper. And so it's very much at the core, it's about encouraging you to focus on trajectory rather than position.
How did you get to 37.78 times better? Like, where'd that ratio number come from?
Yeah. It's just math, right? So if you get 1% better each day for a year, so 1.01 to the 365th power, then you get 37 times better by the end of the year. If you get 1% worse, 0.99 to the 365th power, then you drive yourself almost all the way down to zero. Now, you know, look, real life is not exactly like a mathematical equation, right? Your habits are not exactly like this formula, but I do think that it highlights an important concept, which is the difference between making a choice that's 1% better or 1% worse on any given day is relatively insignificant. Like, it's very easy to dismiss. And this is, I think, one of the things that makes it underappreciated or underestimated. You know, like, what is the difference between eating a burger and fries for lunch today or eating a salad, or, you know, going to the gym for 30 minutes or not? Well, on any given day, not a whole lot. You know, your body looks the same in the mirror at the end of the night. Scale hasn't really changed. It's only 2 or 5 or 10 years later that you turn around and you're like, oh, you know, those daily choices really do add up. And I think you see this pattern again and again throughout life. Like, take knowledge, for example. The person who always reads for an extra 10 minutes each day. Well, look, reading for 10 minutes a day does not make you a genius, right? It's very easy to dismiss. But the person who always does that over 5 or 10 or 20 years, yeah, really meaningful difference in wisdom and insight. Productivity is the same way. You know, like the person who gets 1 extra task done each day. Doing 1 extra thing does not make you an all-star. But again, over a 10 or 20 or 30-year career, that can be a really meaningful difference in output. So this pattern shows up again and again. What starts out small and relatively easy to dismiss compounds or turns into something much more significant over time.
The biggest word, bro. I don't think most people take into account, you and I are both college baseball players, good ones, but neither one of us were, you know, surefire first round draft pick major league players. And I think most people don't take into account in their life the compound effect. I don't think they understand it in money. I don't think they understand it in their bodies, both positive and negative. And I don't think they understand it in their identity or in habits. The compound effect in life of allowing small things to stack up over time has a multiplier effect. And one of the things that I feel like in your work, and by the way, your work is, we're a few minutes in here and I'm like, this is so good. And the reason is one, I believe most people believe they can get 1% better every day. I don't think most people believe that they can completely transform everything in one big leap. I think there's a multiplier, though. Do you agree that between doing the right things 1% or just better habitually every single day, not only are you actually making deposits of doing things correctly or better, but there's a part of your identity that starts to change over time about how you view yourself, that I am that guy who doesn't eat the hamburger and fries when he can choose to eat the other one. And you stack those choices and behaviors up over time, and you start sort of believing maybe you deserve something that you didn't deserve prior. Isn't there a factor of that, don't you think, as well?
This is a huge part of kind of my philosophy and book, this idea of what I call identity-based habits. But essentially the concept is, and this, I think this is the real reason that habits matter. The surface level reason that habits matter is they help you be more productive, they help you make more money, they help you lose weight and get fit. And look, habits can do all those things, and that's great. But I think the deeper reason that they matter is that every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. And so when you perform these small habits, when you take these little actions, you're casting votes for a certain aspect of your story or a certain element of your identity.
Mm.
In a sense, every time you perform a habit, that's how you like embody that aspect of your identity. So, when you make your bed in the morning, you embody the identity of someone who's clean and organized. Or if you write one sentence, you embody the identity of someone who is a writer. And this is why it can be valuable, even to like do one push-up. It's like, no, that does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And eventually, as you build up evidence of that story, as you start to cast more votes for that identity, you have like actual proof to believe this, right? I think this is a little bit different than you'll often hear something like fake it till you make it. And I don't necessarily have anything wrong with fake it till you make it. It's asking you to believe something positive about yourself, but it's asking you to believe something positive without having evidence for it. And we have a word for beliefs that don't have evidence. We call that delusion, right? Like at some point, your brain doesn't like this mismatch between what you say you are and what you're actually doing. And so my argument is to let the behavior lead the way, to start by meditating for 1 minute or doing one push-up or writing one sentence and letting that be undeniable proof that in that moment, you were a meditator or an athlete or a writer or whatever it is. And ultimately, I think this is the real value that habits provide, which is they reinforce your desired identity.
Boy, it's just so good, brother. So good. I don't know why I'm just meeting you now, because our overall belief system about change is so very, very similar. And, we're going to talk about how to actually begin to establish habits. But before we do that, I want to talk about the concept of establishing one, because you said something about the one push-up. I was reading or listening to something you were talking about the guy who would go to the gym for just 5 minutes and work out and leave. And you said something about this casting the vote for who you want to be or who you're going to be. That was powerful, right? But you're saying before a habit can be, and I don't want to quote you incorrectly, but I want you to elaborate on it, because this is profound to me. I mean, it's obvious, but if you don't step back and get away from it and look at it, you just really don't realize the truth of it. Before a habit can be improved, it has to actually be established.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is, you tell me what you think. Beginning of the year, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. I'm going to do this. I'm going to eat then I'm going to starve myself to 500 calories. So it's not a 1% improvement. Or I want to get up earlier. I'm going to get up 2 hours earlier starting tomorrow, instead of get up 15 minutes earlier, right? Get up a minute earlier. So talk about that for a minute, just the concept for everyone to they can take control of their life right now by just the establishment of a habit, right or right?
Yeah, definitely right. So one of the concepts I talk about in the book is this, one of the strategies is this idea of what I call the 2-minute rule, where I encourage people to build a habit that takes 2 minutes or less to do. So you take whatever you're trying to do, read 30 books a year, becomes read 1 page, or do yoga 4 days a week, becomes take out my yoga mat. And sometimes when I mention that idea, people resist it a little bit because they're like, okay, buddy, I know the real goal isn't just to take my yoga mat out. I know I'm actually trying to do the workout. So if this is some kind of mental trick, then like, why would I fall for it, basically? Well, I tell the story of this guy, Mitch, that you mentioned, this guy who I talk about him in Atomic Habits. He went to the gym. He's lost over 100 pounds, kept it off for more than a decade. And when he first started going to the gym, he wouldn't stay for longer than 5 minutes. He had this little rule. He had to leave after 5 minutes. So he'd get in the car, drive to the gym, get out, do half an exercise, get back in the car, drive home. And it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds silly. You're like, obviously he's not going to get the guy the results that he wants. But if you take a step back, you realize that he was mastering the art of showing up, right? He was becoming the type of person that went to the gym 4 days a week, even if it was only for 5 minutes. And this gets us to that deeper truth about habits that you just mentioned, this idea that a habit must be established before it can be improved. It has to become the standard in your life before you can optimize it and scale it up into something more. And, I don't know why we do this. Like, we get very all or nothing about our habits. We're so focused on finding the perfect business idea or the best workout program or the ideal diet plan that we spend all our time theorizing and researching and looking for a better way. And instead, if we could just master the art of showing up, even if in the beginning it was less than what you had hoped to do, you're establishing a foothold. You're building some small progress that you can advance off of. And it reminds me of Ed Lattimore has that great quote where he says, the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door. And man, there are a lot of things in life that are like that. Like the hardest part is getting started. The hardest part is establishing the routine, even if it's a lower level baseline than what you ultimately hope to achieve. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, if you can't become the type of person who masters the art of showing up, even if it's just for 5 minutes, then it doesn't matter how good the plan is. It doesn't matter how great your theory is. And so I think the 2-minute rule pushes back on that perfectionist tendency a little bit and just encourages you to master the art of showing up.
So good. I'm right. Just finished writing a book called One More. And I get asked that sometimes too. And one of the things that I wasn't thinking about it from this perspective when I wrote it, but you can become the kind of person that says, look, it's my bench press. I'm going to do 10. You do one more, you do 11. I even say, if you're riding the treadmill for 45 minutes, you can build that habit of, okay, I'm going 1 more minute. I do 46. What's the difference in that minute? Well, you stack up that minute over a year, there's a difference, but also your identity begins to change. And I'm not telling you to go from 45 minutes to 3 hours on a treadmill. So actually, as I was doing this, I wasn't thinking of it from this perspective. But now that I'm thinking about it, actually our work is sort of converging, almost in the exact same space. Now, establishing habits. I think very few things in books are actually life-changing. Because this is a life-changing thing. Tim Grover's a good friend of mine. He's like, not every show you do is life-changing. And I'm like, it is to me, man. Every one of them. I wouldn't put it out if it wasn't life-changing. And I go, well, which ones are? He goes, mine. When do you have me on? He's been on a couple of times. But the truth is, I actually think this is life-changing work you did when you talk about habit loops. And so I've discussed in life, in fact, I learned it in baseball. I learned in baseball about triggers. The way you put your batting gloves on, triggering a state. I teach it with my athletes. I've talked about it on the show before. I know sometimes even walking into a room or a song can trigger something if there's a memory that happened in a space. But I never thought about it at all as it related to habits. And you call it, so I want you to use your terminology, but let's talk about how do we create habits and what is a habit loop? Because I feel like to some extent that's the foundation of for me in the book when I went, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. This is actually how you do this. No one's ever explained this before. So explain.
So I like to divide habits into 4 different stages, 4 steps. And I think if you understand those 4 steps, then you not only get like what a habit is from a scientific standpoint, you understand like how the process works. You also have 4 different places where you can intervene. So it's like a practical application. You have 4 different ways that you can adjust a habit and make it more likely to build a good one or break a bad one. So the 4 stages, just from a real high level, are cue, craving, response, and reward. Cue, craving, response, and reward. So the cue is, like you said, some kind of trigger that tells your brain to initiate the habit. It's like a prompt or something that gets you started. So like the ambulance driving down the road, when you hear the siren, that's an auditory cue that starts the habit of pulling to the side of the road. Or if you see a plate of cookies on the counter in the kitchen, that's a visual cue, starts the habit of eating a cookie. Now, the next stage is the craving. And the scientific way to describe this is it's a prediction that your brain makes about what that cue means. So you see the plate of cookies on the counter without even really having to think about it. Your brain sort of makes this automatic prediction. Oh, those cookies will be sweet, sugary, tasty, enjoyable. And it's that favorable meaning that you assign to the cue that motivates you to take the third step, which is you walk over, you pick the cookie up and take a bite. And then finally, there's the 4th stage, the reward. Oh, it is in fact sweet, sugary, tasty, enjoyable. And so that's rewarding. Now, not every behavior in life is rewarding, right? Sometimes things have a cost or a consequence. Sometimes they're just kind of neutral and don't really mean a whole lot. But if a behavior is not rewarding, it's unlikely to become a habit. because your brain needs some kind of positive emotional signal, some reason to repeat that experience in the future. You need some way to mark it and say, hey, that felt good. That was worth it. You should do this again when you're in a similar situation next time. Mm-hmm. So cue, craving, response, reward. And that's kind of how we go around the loop and explain like what that habit loop is. And pretty much all behaviors go through those stages in some way. And the more that you go around them, the tighter the feedback loop becomes. It's like it reinforces the behavior. And eventually you're tying your shoes or grabbing a cookie or unplugging the toaster after each use. And you're just doing all those things kind of automatically. You're not even really thinking about it.
Can you give me a practical application of that? If we just walked through any habit, doesn't matter, I want to establish. Can you give me a practical application of that, a strategic application of how I would do it?
Sure. So once we have those 4 stages, I like to try to operationalize it. How do we make this actionable? How do we apply it to a habit like you're asking? And to do that, I've come up with what I call the 4 laws of behavior change. And so there's 1 law for each stage. And if you follow these, they give you kind of like a high level framework for building a good habit or breaking a bad one. So from a real quick, again, from a high level, the 4 laws are: the first law is to make it obvious. You want the cues of your good habits to be obvious, available, visible, easy to see. Easier it is for it to get your attention, the more likely you are to act on it. Second law is to make it attractive. So again, this one connects to the craving, right? The more attractive or appealing or exciting or enticing a habit is, the more likely you are to perform it. The third law is to make it easy. The easier, more convenient, frictionless, simple a habit is, the more likely you are to do it. We've already talked a little bit about that. The 2-minute rule is an example of making it easy. And then the 4th law is to make it satisfying. The more satisfying or enjoyable or rewarding or pleasurable a habit is, the more likely you are to repeat it. So those 4 laws: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. They give you a high level framework for building a habit. If you're ever not sure what to do, if you say, how can I make this more habitual, or how can I, do a better job of doing this consistently? You can just go through those 4 and ask yourself, how can I make it obvious? How can I make it more attractive? How can I make it easier? How can I make it more satisfying? And you'll start to find opportunities to do those things. And of course, the whole book is organized around sharing different strategies for doing that. But let me just give you a couple personal examples so you can see how this might be applied. When the pandemic started, I knew that I was going to want to start. I wasn't going to have to be driving or traveling as much. So I wanted to spend some of that time I was spending traveling previously, that I wanted to use it productively and read more. So I opened up my phone and I downloaded Audible for audiobooks, and I moved the app to the first screen on my phone. I moved all the other apps to the second screen. So the only thing I saw when I opened my phone up was Audible. Now, that's a very small thing, does not radically transform your behavior, but it was a way of making reading more obvious, right? So that's the first law, making it obvious. Let me get it in front of me. I also sprinkled books kind of around the house or on my desk. Like I have 3 on my desk right now. I have a couple, by the bed. I've got a couple in the living room. And the point for me was I never wanted to be far from a good idea. Like I always wanted to be kind of surrounded by something that was interesting or useful to read. And odds are it's more likely that I pick it up and take a look at it. On the flip side, this also applies, this first law of making it obvious. It also applies to many of the bad habits that we have. So, for example, a lot of people feel like they watch too much television, but walk into any living room. Where do all the couches and chairs face? It's like, what is this room designed to get you to do? And so I think the question that you can ask yourself for this first law on making your habits obvious is, what does this space encourage? Right? What behavior is encouraged in this area? And you want to design your life, design the spaces that you live and work in to encourage the good habits and discourage the bad ones, to make the path of least resistance, or the obvious choice, the good habit. So the healthy food is on the counter, not the junk food. Books are around you, not the TV remote, and so on and so forth. And no individual choice like that is going to radically transform things, but you can see how making a dozen or 2 dozen or 50 little tweaks like that, now all of a sudden you're living in a space that always is kind of like nudging you toward the more productive behavior.
Bro, you're brilliant. This is so good. I often feel that change is, change is mental. Change oftentimes is much more environmental than it is mental. And anybody that's ever had a baby around their house, not to leave certain things on the floor.
Yep.
To put the gate up to block the staircase. There's things you do in their environment to protect them. There just becomes a particular age where we think no longer our environment dictates any of our choices or our behaviors. The other thing your environment can do is it can dull your senses as to what is a healthy environment or what are healthy choices. So it might not be obvious cookies on something, but it could be environment, the people around you, their behavior choices, the noise level, auditories, which you talked about earlier. And sometimes that can just dull what we think is normal compared to an extraordinary environment. And so it's, if you walk into any really fit person's home, for the most part, their environment looks a little bit different than an unfit person's home. Your point earlier about making your bed. Most successful people that I know make their bed every day. Most of them do. And most of the people that I know that aren't successful don't make their bed every single day. These seem like ridiculous things environmentally, but there's a messiness, there's a clutter to not making a bed that starts a day. There's a structure. And I guess it's a clean, tight, organized thing about just habitually doing that daily. So I think these things are huge. And I just think the way that you describe it, by the way, you can tell it's a book you need to get if you've not gotten it. 5 million people plus already have. But James also has a newsletter that I want to make sure I promote, because there's just only so much good ideas out there in the world. And James is full of them. And so where do they go get it, James? How do they get your newsletter?
Yeah,
James.com?
It's called 321. And each week I share 3 short ideas from me, 2 quotes from other people, and then 1 question to think about. And you can just go to jamesclear.com and click on newsletter.
Get it, guys.
I thought you brought up a really good point with the structuring the environment for like a baby or a young child. It's very obvious for us to do that because we're trying to set them up for success, right? Like you don't want to put the baby in an environment where, they're surrounded by sharp objects or things that could fall on them or ledges they could trip over or whatever. And that seems so straightforward when you think about it with a child, but like, why would you not want to do that with yourself as well?
Right.
Set the environment up for success, stack the odds in your favor by putting yourself in an environment where the good outcome is the more likely one.
I think people don't do it, James, because they look at someone like yourself that's a high performer, or myself, they think we are, and I think they think we're just ultra disciplined. And discipline comes in a lot of different forms. And so discipline is, for me, I always tell people, show me your habits and show me your calendar. I can pretty much show you what your life's going to look like, right? Your calendar looks like crap. You're not loaded with enough stuff that you should be doing that serves whatever your goals and outcomes are. Habitually, you don't do the right things. You're going to end up long-term with a particular result. But I think that the notion, I used to think it, this person's just so much more disciplined than me. The truth is, I'm not. I love Cheetos. I love television. I love Netflix. I love not thinking. I like not working. So because I lack natural discipline, as an athlete, I was disciplined, but there were more disciplined guys. I like to work out, but if you said, Ed, you can be jacked, sexy, ripped, live to 150 years old and not lift all this heavy stuff and eat clean, I'd probably eat the pizza and the Cheetos, right? So it's my lack of discipline that's caused me to create habits and an environment around me that supports them, that allows me to get some of these things done. It's the lack of discipline, actually, in my case, that causes me to know I need these structures around me. So we're not different than you.
There's a chapter in the book called The Secret to Self-Control, and I talk about some of the studies and research around willpower and so on. And one of the key findings is that people who exhibit high willpower, who appear on the surface to have a great deal of willpower, the primary thing that is different between them and people who appear to have low levels of willpower is that they are in environments where they are tempted less. So their environment is primed for them to be high willpower. And I think that alone should inform a lot of your strategy. Again, how do we stack the deck in your favor? How do you design an environment where you don't need to be a superhero just to get something done? Like if you're constantly putting yourself in a tough position where you're fighting against the friction of the environment you're in, it's almost like a form of gravity. It sort of pulls you toward it. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you kind of brought up, talking about like putting yourself in an exceptional environment. And actually, so we've talked about the first law, making it obvious. This actually connects directly to the second law, making it attractive. So far, we've mostly talked about physical environment, but the social environment is also crucial. And I think this is, if I could pick one topic that I think is even more important than I realized when I wrote the book, I would probably say it's this. We are all part of multiple tribes. Some of those tribes are large, like what it means to be American or what it means to be French. And some of those tribes are smaller, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street or a member of the local CrossFit gym or a volunteer at the elementary school or whatever. But all of those tribes, all those groups that you belong to, they have a set of shared expectations, a set of social norms for how you act in that group and the type of habits that you perform. And like, if we take the neighbor on your street example, and say you walk outside on like Tuesday night and you see that your neighbor is mowing their grass or cutting their lawn, and you're like, oh, I need to mow the grass too. Well, you might stick to that habit for 20 or 30 or 40 years, like however long you live in that house. You wish you had that level of consistency with some of your other habits. And why do you do it? Partially, you do it because it feels good to have a clean lawn, but mostly it feels good to have a clean lawn because you don't want to be judged by the other people in the neighborhood for being the sloppy one. And so it's actually the social expectation of that group, of that tribe of neighbors on your street, that's kind of underlying that habit and the consistency that you have. And so the expectations of the group often influence in a very strong way which habits we find attractive and which ones we find unattractive, and which ones we stick to consistently and which ones we don't. And I think the practical
what's up?
Is you want to
what's
your
up?
desired behavior.
Yo, man, what's happening? Not much.
Because if you're
what's up?
Who are doing that thing
what's
on a normal basis, it's a part of that tribe's culture or expectation. It suddenly becomes much easier for you to stick to that too. You know, you hear stories about this from entrepreneurs all the time. I have one as well, which is,
please
when
don't
I started out
unfollow.
as an entrepreneur, I had nobody around me that was doing that. I don't have any entrepreneurs in my family. I didn't have like this, network of people who had started businesses to tap into. And so for the first 6 months, I just sent tons of emails to different people who were doing what I already wanted to do. I probably sent about 300 emails or so. Most people didn't get back to me, but maybe 30 or so did. And I set up calls with them and chatted on Skype. And then about a month later, I met 5 or 6 of them in a conference. And so now I had a group of people that were already doing the thing I wanted to do, that I actually knew, that I could go to with questions, that I could look at. And they were doing these things. It wasn't weird for me to do it anymore. It wasn't weird for me to try to do this.
Yo, what's up, Sour Stash? How you doing, man?
I had a tribe where the desired behavior.
Happy, the AI generated happy.
And that made
I typed happiest man in the world, and that's what came up. That's what AI gave us.
So good, brother. I take 2 things from that I want to add, and then I want to ask you something that I'm just fascinated to ask you about. But I'm enjoying this very much.
I'm guessing good on video. Looking some good.
All day with you.
GOOD. Thanks, buddy. Good, nice. How you doing, man? Hope you're good, Sour.
And I came back,
this guy here, he's in the same insurance company that I'm in.
It was like a week-long deal.
Full-time under you? Nice. And what?
Said, Dad, just the fact that you use these words, bro, just blows my mind. The actual word. I said, Dad, I figured out that my life's going to be a direct reflection of the expectations of my peer group. He just sort of stared back at me real quiet, and he goes, that's actually really good. And I said, I actually believe that, Dad. I think my life will end up being a direct reflection of what my peer group expects of me. And I need to find the right peer groups. And pretty much the rest of my life, whatever I've wanted to go try to achieve or become or feel or experience,
Gratz Sour.
I've sought peer groups that expect
or
that.
Or are you talking Home Depot full-time?
One of the most powerful things what you just said anyone has ever said on my show. And
Leave Schreiber, I don't know who that is, man.
The second thing I was thinking when you were talking
about me,
to support our habits and our choices, is that if I were a leader of any organization listening to this,
that's cool, man. That's cool. It's good to make more money, though. How's Miami, buddy?
A family, a coach.
I miss it, man. I
I'd be
miss it.
thinking about that real heavy again, evaluating back.
You'll get your 8 hours, no worries, buddy.
Raising my organization and am I
very hot.
If I was leading a church,
that's
if I was
fun.
leading any type of a business.
Saber to the Edmund, he's a beast, man. He's so jacked, dude.
Supporting your outcomes and your goals, because the way you describe that, James, doesn't just apply to an individual, it applies to an organism,
very
an
hot,
organization
nice.
as well.
Cool, man. So it sounds like you're going to bed.
Second that for those of you listening to this. There's 2
no
ways
worries
to hear
if you're hanging out.
For me,
okay,
and I'm hearing for the people that I try to lead and I try to support. You mentioned earlier the phone thing.
Oh, 8 hours of sleep.
I wanted to ask you this since I read the book. And by the way, I read the book a while ago.
On Monday.
And then I prepped for the interview, getting to know more, and it reminded me of things. I actually think
Take
I read
tomorrow
the book,
off.
and then I read it again like 6 weeks later on a vacation because I thought it was that
Thanks,
good.
man.
I don't
All right, I'm
read
due rep.
books.
I'm due rep.
I bet I've reread,
or set, rather.
my religious texts, 4 books in my life: Think and Grow Rich, and your book, and probably 2 more, but I can't recall right now. That's how much I think there's value in the book, just for at least for me and my stage.
Yeah, your VR streams are cool, man. They're cool. I like it. Really cool. I like hanging out in it. I don't have VR though, but it makes me want to get it. It's pretty cool, man. The community's cool. Reminds me of the early, or late 90s
Audible was the only app on there.
online chat.
But that that in and of itself, the smartphone thing gives
I can't remember what it's called.
Here's what my theory on it is. I want to say it really quickly.
Something moo cows?
Technology, the internet, phones, access, smartphones have allowed all of us to become
I do, my man, I do. My car's manual, dude.
But then you have to ask yourself, now you're being measured against the mean.
It's nice,
so
I like it.
Cultures become more accessible information. You can get things done faster. There's still
I'm doing a set, and then I'll
of which people are productive. And so some people use their phone in a way that puts them below the average or near the average. Other people are able to navigate all those distractions and be hyper productive. So is there something you recommend with a phone or you do in your phone? What apps do you have? Do you not have? Anything like that you would share?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, smartphones are a huge part of our daily routine now. And you're right. They have strong positives, but they also can have strong negatives. A couple little patterns I have around my phone usage. So the first one is whenever possible, I try to leave my phone in another room until lunch each day. And that just gives me a block of time so that I can just respond to my own agenda, right? And do like a deep creative block or focus on my stuff before everybody else starts squeezing things onto my plate. And, that doesn't work for every job. And it also doesn't work for me every day, but I do it most days. And the days when I do, I almost always have a better morning. Some little interesting insight with that, by the way, just as an aside, I have a home office. So if I leave my phone in another room, it's like 45 seconds away, but I never go get it. And yet, if it's right next to me, I'm like everybody else. I check it every 3 seconds. So I'm like, well, did I want it or not? Like in one sense, I wanted it bad enough to check it every 3 seconds when it was next to me. And in another sense, I never wanted it so bad that I would go work 45 seconds to get it. And I think that there's a lesson in this about habit formation, which is sometimes you just need a little bit of friction to curtail the behavior to the desired degree. It's not that I never want to use my phone again. It's just that I don't want to use it all the time and let it interrupt like some of these deeper working sessions that I have. And so that 45 seconds is just enough friction to keep it in place. Something similar happens with like beer. If I get like a 6-pack of beer and I put it in the front of the fridge where I can see it like as soon as I open the door up, I'll have one every night at dinner just because it's there. But if I put it down on the lowest shelf and like tuck in the back of the fridge where I can't really see it, I got to kind of bend down to spot it. Sometimes it'll be there for weeks. I won't even remember that we bought it. And so same thing, like, did I want it or not? And so finding ways to introduce a little bit of friction to your habits, I think can be very helpful.
Wow, that's good.
On that same note, I'll go through different periods of friction with social media. So I think there's a big discussion we could have here about social media. I don't think that most people are using it to its full power. It can be incredibly powerful. Twitter in particular is like a great source of ideas for me at this point, but it's only because I've spent a lot of time curating who I follow. And so my feed is very productive. I'm like in the flow of good ideas all the time. People don't really think about it this way, but when you choose who to follow on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, you're choosing your future thoughts, right? Like you're choosing the flow of information that you're going to put yourself in front of. And pretty much every thought that you have,
I check my phone all the time
from what you consume,
and I will continue to do so.
Have better thoughts, if you want to be a sharper thinker,
I'm not going to change my habits at all.
You're consuming better pieces of information, and so curating.
I'm doing okay so far. I'm kind of a need. I'm definitely kind of sheltered, but
even so, there's still
I'm not planning to change
anything. Social media. I'm
maybe less 4chan and maybe less Twitch.
Bothered by that. So I usually fall into one of two strategies. Either
where
I will delete the app from my phone after each time I use it. So when I get done using Twitter, I'll just delete it. And
just
that means
Twitch,
the next time I need to download the app again.
Only when it's like where someone's playing and I really want to watch them or I need to do something, and then I'm like, okay, this is like
I'm just doing this
textbook addiction definition.
It's not because I actually want to check it. And so
So I noticed that today.
Occasionally, I do
need to get something done, but Mitch Flower Power discovered this new.
And then if I really get extreme, and I
he was going into like the frames of Super Mario Bros. 3,
I just like really had
and I was like, I can't miss this. I'm like, wait a second, I'm gonna miss my thing I need to go to. I'm like addicted. So I turned off Mitch. I'm like, okay, good. So I'm actually kind of proud of myself for that today.
Reset all the passwords. I would work all week, and then on Friday she would send me the passwords, and I could log in over the weekend.
Yeah, me too, man.
And I did.
It's all right. You gotta love life, man.
So
you gotta love life, man.
You
gotta enjoy life.
That's a very extreme version.
No, brother, it's an extreme example though of the fact that you're not relying on some sort of mystical discipline to get things done in your life. And I really believe most people think high achievers are just these super crazy disciplined people. That is an extreme move. And it's probably something I should have done when I was writing my book. And you would already be reading it by now instead of me just finishing writing it. It's making me really think. I've done a much better job of managing that stuff, but I have to tell you, I think it's one of the great distractions of all time. I hadn't thought about it as in depth as you describe it in terms of future thoughts, though. And again, I go back to children. We want to monitor what our children consume and what they look at. Somehow we think we can pick an age and we're immune to the things that we're watching that impact our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and our energy. And I got to tell you, man, you're 100% right. I watch people get transformed by what they're consuming on there and become so distracted. So I'm reading an article you wrote that resonated with me. And I don't know that this gets worse as maybe you achieve more. But you're like, the ultimate productivity hack is saying no. So this isn't part of the book. This is something a little bit different, right? And I think most people have a hard time saying no. And I know I do. There's so many days now, I'm 50 years old, and I'm just being transparent with friends of mine that listen to this because I look at this is like my family, our audience. I have a lot of days, man, where I look at my calendar and I'm like, why did I agree to this? Why did I agree to this? Like, why couldn't I just say politely no? I mean, I should have got to a point in my life by now where like I'm allowed to say I don't want to do that. And yet I've done that all my life. And it's been a hindrance to achievement. So talk about that a little bit. Like, you want to be more productive. This article, by the way, guys, Google it. It's so good. It actually teaches you how to say no as well in the article. But are you good at this, or did you write it for your own benefit?
Well, pretty much everything I write is a reminder to myself of what I should be doing. So no, it's not that I'm great at it. It's that I'm trying to learn to be better at it. I felt this very acutely after Atomic Habits came out. And over the course of the first like 3 months that it was out, I was doing okay. And then the book really started to take off. And I was constantly feeling like I'm a very slow learner and that I should have been upgrading the level at which I was saying no to things. And I was always like 2 or 3 months behind. I was always on the hook for more stuff than I should have been. And it was because I was saying yes to too many things. And there's this weird dynamic where success starts to eat itself. So the thing that was getting me all of these opportunities is because I was focused and I wrote a good book. And because of that, people were very interested in talking to me or sharing these new ideas. And like, there's all these interesting new opportunities that come your way. Do you want to speak at this thing? Or what about these TV rights? Or how about this interesting opportunity? Or would you like to come to this, cool conference or retreat or whatever? And individually, each of them sounds really fun and interesting. But collectively, if you start to say yes to all those things, you don't have any more time to do the thing that got you those opportunities in the first place, which is thinking clearly and writing a good book. And so success like eats itself. All these new opportunities come in and they squeeze out the thing that you were good at in the first place. So it's I don't know. The other thing that's difficult about it, and I still, I'm close enough to the beginning of my career that I can still appreciate this and feel this. For the first decade of my career, I was trying to say yes to everything. I was trying to capitalize on every opportunity so that I would have the chance now to say no to basically everything because you got a bunch of stuff coming your way. So at first it's like outbound and you're trying to like capitalize on every opportunity you can. And then there's this like rapid switch where now all of a sudden everything's inbound and you have to put up a tight filter. And that can be a difficult lesson to learn.
It's almost a book, bro. The success can eat itself. I've watched it happen over and over and over to people, that the very thing that got them successful, in your case, the discipline and focus to write an incredible book, they somehow lose over time with saying yes to all of these other things that were ancillary to it at one point.
You know that quote? There's a quote from Brian Eno, he's a musician. He says, the way to get rich is to have one good idea and to never have another one. And it's like you just keep capitalizing on that thing and you don't distract yourself. You don't keep saying yes to all this other stuff that's on the fringe, but it's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Long-term success, man, is not always easy because of things like success can't eat itself. A couple of things I want to ask you. We're going to run out of time, but I'm fascinated by your work, brother. What do you do when you're slipping? You feel yourself slipping on some of your habits? Is there something that you do immediately or that you notice? Are you Yeah, I guess even is there a part of your awareness of like, I'm more vigilant to see if I'm slipping than I used to be? What are your thoughts on that?
I do think my sense of it has improved over time. I do think I've become a little more vigilant. Maybe early on, like my early 20s, maybe I didn't realize it when it was happening. I'd be a little late. It would take a week or two before I'd see it. Now, I think I actually usually can tell within that day or the next day, like pretty quickly, if it's like, oh, you're starting to get off course, like you missed a workout or you missed a deadline with the writing this time or whatever. And what I found, it almost, it works so well for me that it's almost a crutch, which is the number one thing that will always get me back on track is to have a good workout. It will save every bad day that I have. If I feel terrible, if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm not productive, I'm not getting things done. If I go to the gym and I get one good hour in, then the whole day is kind of like rescued. And it also resets my mind. And I'm like, after a hard workout and a good night's sleep, your problems adjust to their appropriate size. It's like, it doesn't mean that it's not a problem still. It just means that you see it clearly and you understand like the scope of it and where it fits. But I say that it's almost a crutch because sometimes I know that now. And so if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, well, I just need to work out and then I'll go do that. But that doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. I still haven't fixed the root cause yet. So I can't rely on that too much, but that's definitely the thing that does it best for me.
Me too. Is there something two questions left, by the way. Thank you for this. I'm enjoying it, man. We'll do something together. You're outstanding. Is there something that your top achievers do that you work with, that you talk with, that you interact with, that the people that aren't achieving at their level do? I know that's a broad question, but does something come to your mind where you go, yep, this is what they do?
Yep. Yeah, no, I'll give you two things. So first thing is we could put this different ways, but they reclaim their habits faster than most people, or they get back on track quickly. So top performers make mistakes like everybody else. And I think most of us know this or have felt this from going through life, which is it's almost never the first mistake that ruins you. It's the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. It's like it's letting slipping up become a new habit. That is the real problem. And if you make one mistake, you miss a workout or you miss a deadline or you flop on a speech or a presentation, if you get back on track quickly, if the next iteration you don't miss and you're right back,
buddy, it's amazing,
then your progress is generally maintained. And
my quad right here is kind of,
but if you miss a workout,
it's kind of hurting a bit. I did a workout yesterday of like L sits and like leg raises and stuff.
You have backslided.
I don't know. I might use it a little bit. Game changer, yeah.
And so I would say,
I don't know. That's why I haven't been streaming.
A lot of people are focused on what can I achieve.
I've been like using this every day,
and that's kind of how they select their habits. Like,
but I've been missing the big heavyweights, so I've been doing the heavyweights today.
But instead, you could ask yourself,
I don't know. I'm gonna see how I feel. I might do it at the very end.
And I think that could be your baseline. And if you try to raise that,
I don't know if you want to see me do something, write it in the chat. But
a little bit better than they were before.
I don't know if I will. I mean, I'm not
to the compounding as much.
I know I literally put in the title. I'll do some stuff. I'll do some stuff.
I think that's pretty good. They respond from.
I love hanging from the bar and doing the leg raises and the L sits, bro.
Mindset, a way to think about things than specific
I'll do it now.
action.
If it hurts, I'll stop.
This is a phrase that comes from Frank Slootman. He's the CEO of Snowflake, the software company. And basically, it's something to the effect of,
at least I'll do one.
Narrow the focus.
I got the parallel bars here too.
Increase the speed. So
Same.
Narrow the focus, do less. Stop trying to do so much. It's very hard to be, we could maybe even say it's impossible to be a top performer in a dozen different things. Like you have to choose what matters most. So do less, narrow the focus, up the quality. Once you have selected those few things that truly matter, do them at an exceptional degree, right? Do them in a very high level way. And then finally, increase the speed. Only once you have selected a few things to focus on and you do them at a high level, then you can worry about shipping more consistently or increasing the volume or scaling the project or whatever. And those are simple ideas, but I think that top performers take those simple ideas very seriously, and you'd be surprised how far they can take you if you do take them seriously.
So freaking good, bro. So good. All right, last question. I run into you in a Starbucks somewhere. I'm a budding new entrepreneur with some dreams. I could be 50 years old. I could be 25 years old. I said, James, just tell me where I should just give me one thing to start with. One thing that you haven't said to Ed Milet so far in this interview that, I want to create some change. Can you give me some place to start, one thing to do, one thought to have, one action to take, whatever it might be? What would you say to them?
Well, so again, I'll say two things. The first is a piece of advice that was given to me when I was in that situation. So when I was starting out, one of the best things that somebody said to me early on was try things until something comes easily. And I think if you break that phrase down, there are two important pieces. The first is trying things, which means you need to have a philosophy of experimentation. This is actually quite different than what a lot of people do when they start out. A lot of people feel like what they need to do is read more and research more and try to, discover everything that's out there. And it's not that you shouldn't plan. It's not that preparation isn't useful. It is useful. But at some point, planning becomes its own form of procrastination. And when that happens, it's not useful anymore. And so you have to have some willingness to experiment, to try things, to test stuff out and see what works specifically for you. What matters most is not if it's like the best strategy that's ever been designed. What matters is, will it work for you and for your situation? And you can only figure that out by experimenting. So that's the first part. And then the second piece is until something comes easily. Now, the key distinction here is that does not mean that it is easy, right? It doesn't mean that it's going simply or smoothly. It just means that the results are coming more easily than the other stuff that you had tried. You may still have to work very hard to get that outcome. But this, I also think, helps reveal like your strengths in the situation. So a lot of people think like your strengths are just something that like must come effortlessly to you or something. But actually, in many cases, your strength is the thing that's challenging or the suffering or the pain that you can handle better than most people. So it's not that it's not challenging for you. It's just that you seem to be able to handle that form of pain a little bit better than most people. And I think if you look at a lot of top performers, they're like that. You know, it's not that athletes aren't working hard. It's not that they're not sweating. It's not that it's not tough to be in the gym and like doing the next rep. It's just that they can kind of handle that pain, you know, like that form of suffering isn't that bad for them relative to the average person. And so you're looking for those two qualities, a philosophy of experimentation and the ability to get results in a way that allows you to handle that struggle a little bit better than others.
Bro, what an incredible conversation today. I'm telling you, incredible conversation. Like, I can't wait to listen to this back. It was so good. I think you're incredible. I really think you're incredible. I think you're outstanding. I want you guys to follow him. Okay, so you're mainly a Twitter guy, right? Mainly Twitter?
Twitter and Instagram, yep.
Okay. Twitter and Instagram. So you guys make sure that you're following James. You're going to want to get whatever he's working on right now when it comes back out. I just want to say everything to my audience, too. First, I want to thank James Clear for being here today. That was an extraordinary conversation, and I appreciate you, bro. So thank you. And then to my audience, share this. I don't know if you're all aware of this now, but there's all kinds of incentive and rewards now to share the show. Some of you are going to earn the right to come watch me do one live in the studio. You're going to come spend a day with me to, be with me and one of my guests very soon. There's all kinds of rewards out there to share the show. And I know you're compelled to do it anyway. It's the fastest growing show in the world. That's why we're in this new agreement and new deal that we're doing. And I'm grateful to our Max Out family for doing that. So God bless all of you. I hope you enjoyed today's program. Take care. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around. If you'd like more, click the videos right here. They're exactly what you need to see next. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and become a part of the Max Out community. And tell me what you think about the videos in the comments below. I read all of them every week, and I select winners that get all kinds of prizes, gear, coaching calls with me. Make a comment.
Your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you programmed your supercomputer not to. They say the two most powerful words in the English language are also the smallest, I am. Because whatever you put after that, complete that sentence with, is going to determine your destination, your destiny. And I also feel like you have to fall in love again with the person in the mirror who has been through so much, but is still standing. Once you know yourself, you need the courage to be yourself.
Welcome back to Max Out, everybody. I'm Ed Milet. Let me ask you a question before we begin today. Do you have any sense right now like you feel like you're just overloaded and you're overwhelmed with information in your life? Maybe you're having a hard time getting focused. You get distracted pretty easily. Maybe your concentration sort of suffers a little bit, your memory issues. Well, my guest here today is an expert on optimum brain performance, on learning quickly, and on maxing out your capacity to think and perform in your life. And it was really born out of some tragedy, out of some difficult events out of his childhood. He's turned those tragic events into becoming a world-renowned expert on brain performance. And today I'm really blessed because I've been chasing this guy for a while. I've wanted him to share his brilliance with you, the audience. And I'm grateful that he's here today because we're about to change your life and change the way you learn, think, and perform. So my guest today is the great Jim Kwik. Jim, thank you.
Ed, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this so much.
Me too, brother. We've had great conversations off camera, and I'm so excited because I know there's some shows I know that we do that are inspirational, and then there are shows I know that are going to inspire, but also by the end of the program, people's lives are just measurably better and they can perform better. And today is heavy note taking. If you're driving in the car, you're going to want to hear it, but you're going to want to get back and listen to the video or something too to write the notes down we're going to cover. So let's just go back just a little bit because I want to give people context, because I really believe life happens for us, not to us. And it's the meaning in our life of the events that happen to us, not the event, but the meaning we take from it. And so you've become this world-renowned expert. You've worked with the Dalai Lama, Richard Branson, right? Some of the highest profile celebrities in the world, most successful business people. But it's ironic that that was founded out of a boy with a broken brain, right? And that was because you had fallen and hurt your head, is that right? Like a 5-year-old? Or tell us that story real quick.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I just posted this on Instagram today. I said, difficult times could define us, they could diminish us, or they could develop us. You decide. Because ultimately we do decide. And yeah, when I know I'm such a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
And follower of your work. And first of all, before we get started, I appreciate everyone who's watching this. And what I love is you are the person you are on and off camera.
Oh, thank you.
And that means a lot to me. You know, your humility, because you're so accomplished. And so the reason why I'm excited about this is because I think this message we have to talk to people about is so important, because your brain controls everything.
Yeah.
Right? When people see me on stage, they'll see me have 100 people stand up and I'll memorize all their names as they introduce themselves, or 100 words or 100 numbers that they give me forwards and backwards.
I've seen this man have 100 people give him 2 numbers out of sequence, and he'll repeat back 100 people's multiple numbers like this.
And here's the thing, I always tell people I don't do this to impress you, I do this to express to you what's really possible. Because the truth is, every single person that's listening and watching this could do that and a lot more.
Oh my gosh.
The thing is, we weren't taught. You know, if anything, we were taught a lie, that somehow our capabilities, our potential, our memory, for instance, our learning abilities, our intelligence is somehow fixed, like our shoe size. Wow. And it's absolutely not true. We've discovered more about the human brain in the past 20 years than the previous 2,000 years combined. And what we found is we've grossly underestimated our own potential, our own capabilities. And that's the thing, it's just because we weren't taught. And I really think the nature of the work that you do, that I do, that our community is really backing, is about transcending. It's about ending the trance. Wow. Transcend, end the trance, ending this massive gnosis in media and marketing that's telling us that we're broken, that we need to be fixed, that we're not enough. And I feel like that is what holds us back. You know, this illusion, if you will.
That's remarkable. Did you feel that way as a little guy?
You know, when I was 5 years old, as you mentioned, I had this accident, head trauma, brain injury, traumatic brain injury. After that, my parents said I was never the same. You know, I became extremely shy, introverted. I had learning difficulties. I was labeled, and a label is tough, right? Yeah. You know, when you're put in special classes, I couldn't understand things. My teachers would repeat themselves 4 or 5 times, and I would pretend to understand. Yeah. Like sometimes we do as an adult. You know, we have this imposter syndrome. We always want to. We want to look good. We don't want to ever make a mistake, which I feel like also holds us back.
In this space, the things you teach can affect someone's life like this, and that's what I love. So can we talk about some of those things?
Absolutely.
I'm just fascinated. Look at me, right? We only have an hour. I wish we had 17. But you said if there was one skill to master in the 21st century,
yes.
In your opinion, it is what? What would you say?
Your ability to learn faster.
To learn faster.
I really do believe that if there was, let's say there was a genie, and they could grant you one wish, anything you want.
Yeah.
Most people would wish for more wishes. That would be the hack, right? If somebody, Aladdin's going to give you one wish, you ask for more wishes. But if I was a learning genie and I could help you learn any subject, any skill, anything, what would you want? What would you wish for? You would ask to learn how to learn. I did a program at Google, and I remember hearing this from the chairman. Said the amount of information that's been created from the dawn of humanity, since human beings walked the earth to the year 2003, which is only about a decade and a half ago, that amount of information is now created every 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
48 hours online. Think about the blogs, the podcasts, the social media, that much content. Our brain, they say we use such a small potential of it.
Yeah.
We use all our brain,
okay.
But some people use it more efficiently than other people.
But you talk an awful lot about the way we were learning 100 years ago is still the same way we're taught to learn. And a simple thing you said, because almost everybody listening to this, well, I know they are. They're listening to this as a podcast.
Right.
They're taking notes.
Sure.
They go to seminars. They take notes. They're reading books. And just a simple difference in the way we take notes, even.
Right.
You have told, I didn't even realize this, but this is an old way to take notes. There's a different way to experience even note taking. Can you give some tips on that?
So I recommend everybody takes notes of this specific episode. Because it boosts retention. People don't realize this. There's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve. Science is saying that within 2 days, just 48 hours of listening to a podcast, reading a book, going to a conference, getting a coaching, 80% of it, up to 80% is lost.
Incredible.
And that's, as somebody who's investing time, energy, treasure into something, to lose all that, and so you want to be able to hold that on. Okay. And so one of the ways of doing it is by taking notes. And we did a whole episode on proper note taking, and really one that's more brain friendly.
Okay.
Most people, and what they found is the worst way of taking notes actually is verbatim.
Which is the way I take notes.
Yeah, verbatim,
I used to.
full transcription. And they study this, at universities because they test people. They have people take word for word. And one of the reasons why is because there's just so much information. Okay. Right, you have 18 pages of word for word. You don't even know what's most important. But they found the best way of actually taking notes were more on keywords and relevancy. So for example, one of the ways of taking notes that I recommend is taking a piece of paper and putting a line straight down the page.
Okay.
And on the left side, what I'm doing is I'm capturing information.
Okay.
Capturing. So we could talk about how to remember names and how to read faster and how to learn skills faster, how to change your habits. That would be on the left-hand column. You're capturing information. Okay. But on the right side, instead of capturing, you're creating. What does that mean? It means that you're creating and you're building on this. You're putting your impression. So essentially on the left side, you're taking notes, but on the right side, you're making notes. And there's a clear distinction, right, between just capturing information and actually create the creative process.
Why does that matter?
It matters because if you're, first of all, for focus. A lot of people, when they're listening to something, their mind will go somewhere else. They'll get distracted. So here, instead of it going somewhere else, it goes on the right side of the page, which is, let's say, left side, right brain. Left brain, right brain. Left brain's more logical and words and language and linear. But on the right side is your imagination, it's your creativity. So your creativity could go there. The other thing is it forces you to ask questions. I believe that questions are the answer. I think it's the essential for understanding, for critical thinking, for focus, for learning. If you ever want to read something, and let's say people feel absent-minded.
Yes.
They forget where they put things. Their wallet, their purse, their keys, or if not their keys, something larger like their car. You see the people in the finding, they forget where they parked their car. They read a page in a book at the end and forget what they just read. They'll get a name from somebody and they'll just forget it right away. One of the ways to insulate that is to ask questions. Right, to ask questions about something. So for example, when I'm taking notes, I'll capture information on the left side, but on the right side, I'll write questions I have about what I'm learning. I'll ask myself questions like how I'm gonna apply it. You know what the biggest challenge I have with the self-help personal development industry is that there's this massive lie that's being spread saying that knowledge is power. Yeah.
Thinking is the process of asking and answering questions to yourself.
That's why left and right page here matters. Everybody stay with us on that. That's all thinking is. That's all thought
exactly.
is.
And you're capturing your thinking. And even the greatest minds out there, they journal. They're always creative. You know, you think about Leonardo da Vinci or Marie Curie, like they had their journals are worth fortunes.
Yes.
Right? And it's interesting asking this question, is it because they were geniuses? And when I say genius, I don't mean IQ. I mean they're exceptional in their field, right? Whether it's sports, whether it's technology, finance.
It's a form of genius.
Relationships, interpersonal skills, interpersonal communication. Is it because they're geniuses that they're taking all these notes? Or is it because they're creating all these notes that make them geniuses, right? And so it's interesting. And so I like to journal. And I think that that's extremely important. And the questions, though, to take knowledge and turn action, 3 main questions I obsess about. Number 1 is, how can I use this? I ask this all the time because I don't learn for the sake of learning. I learn for the sake of some kind of benefit from me or somebody I care about.
So I'm staying with you. This would be the right side of the page as I'm taking some
notes.
Right,
so I'm taking notes, and but I'm obsessed about it. So even if I'm not writing it down, even when I'm having a conversation with somebody or I'm listening, I'm in a conference, how can I use this? And this is the creativity part. It's like, oh wow, these are all the ways I could use this and apply this. The second question I ask religiously is, after I ask, how can I use this? I'm asking myself, why must I use this? Why must I use this? Because here's the thing, a lot of people know what to do, they don't do what they know. You can't come up with one reason, you're not going to remember. Because reasons reap results. Reasons reap results. Reasons reap rewards, right? Simon Sinek, start with why. Right? Always get into this. So ask yourself why, and the questions that makes all the difference. So first question, how can I use this? And that's the creativity. You come up with all these ideas. Why must I use this? The reasons why. And then the third question I ask a lot is, when will I use this? And I think one of the most powerful productivity performance tools there are calendars, right? It's like that app, calendar app, or if you keep a physical calendar, that's important, because if it's not there, it's not real. Right? You schedule this in, and then it becomes real, and it's going to happen.
89% to 100% of the people listening to this struggle with remembering something basic like somebody's name. Okay, so help us. So I know a little bit of that is what you just shared, that similar technique. So, I mean, in business alone, I can tell you, people's favorite topic is not their sports team or their children or anything. People's favorite topic is them. Right? And one of their favorite sounds is the sound of you saying their name. And oftentimes, most of you in a business setting, you know this, the minute you've heard their name, you've forgotten it, like those car keys that you lose periodically, but you lose their name constantly. And so this concept that you just shared about association with something you already know, is that one of the things you would do to remember a name?
It is.
Here we go, everybody.
So here we go. This is now, you want to take notes on this. I think one of the most important business etiquette, networking, skills, if there was one, is your ability to remember someone's name. Because how are you going to show somebody you're going to care for their business, their future, their finances, their health, whatever it is you have to offer them, if you don't care enough just to remember them? Because what's the message we send to somebody when we ask them for their name again 2 or 3 times?
You're not important.
You're not important, right? And that doesn't matter what you say after that. It's null and void, right? And so people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And here's the thing, and Maya Angelou said it beautifully, people won't remember what you say, they won't remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's going back to the emotion again, right? And so that caring is everything. Nothing sells like caring. The truth is, you could always remember that name. And that's, so I'm calling people who are watching this on their BS. That when you say you're not good at remembering names, that's not true. You just remembered somebody's name. Why? What's the difference? You're motivated. So the M in Max Out, the M stands for motivation. And I would say, how do you do it? Ask yourself questions. You could elevate your level of motivation. You could ask yourself, what's my level of motivation to remember something, or to learn this, or to remember this name? You could say 0 to 10, give it a number, 5. Well, and here's this mind hack. How do I thought experiment, how do I make it turn it from a 5 to a 7? What do I need to think about differently? Like how that person's going to feel, or the business I could create for them, or just learning these skills better, right? Tony says what you practice in private, you're rewarded for in public, right? And so maybe it's just a skill that you're practicing. So motivation. I remember I was doing a training in Silicon Valley, and after I was done, somebody comes up to me. It was Bill Gates. And I asked him, like, if you could have any one superpower, what would it be? He was like, Jim, the ability to read faster. And Warren Buffett was like, I've wasted probably 10 years of my life reading slowly. And that's why reading and speed reading is so important, because people spend about 4 hours processing information a day. You think about all the emails and the business plans and the books and all the stuff you have to process.
Yes.
If you could just double your reading speed and go from 4 hours to 2 hours, you save 2 hours a day.
Whoa.
What's 2 hours a day over the course of a year? Actually, let's say you just save 1 hour a day. That's 365 hours a year.
Incredible.
That's how many 40-hour work weeks? 9.
9.
2 months
Oh
of productivity,
my gosh.
more than 2 months of productivity is saving 1 hour a day on something ubiquitous like reading. So that's
Faster.
why we do so much, like for people out you watching this, I know a lot of people are entrepreneurs, they have teams. The biggest line item, right, is human capital,
Yes,
right, payroll.
for sure.
But if they're reading 4 or 5 hours a day, that means half of their salary is being paid to read. Right, so if someone's getting paid $80,000, $40,000 just to read. That's why we train at Nike and Google and General Electric and all these individuals, because that's the faster you could raise the collective intelligence of your team, the more that they could be competitive, right?
Yes.
And so going back to this, the M is motivation. So I would always say, if you want to learn something new, check in with your motivation, because here's the thing: all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent. This is the thing. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. We know that.
Okay.
And we know this because ultimately the expert's not always the person on the podcast or on stage. You are your own expert. So genius leaves clues.
Okay.
Genius leaves clues all the time. So when somebody's exceptional in some area, there's a method behind the magic, including for your own self. Okay. So you don't remember all names, but you certainly don't forget all names. Now, go and deconstruct that, decode that. Usually the names you remember are names you're motivated to.
Okay.
You're somebody that is attracted to somebody that could be good for their business, right? So there's the emotion there. So emotion tied to information becomes a long-term memory. Because here's the thing, is there like a song or fragrance or food that could take you back to when you were a kid?
Absolutely.
Because information tied with that emotion becomes a long-term memory. But here's the thing, back in school, what was the primary emotion we felt? Boredom, right? Half the room is bored, the other half is confused. But on a scale of 0 to 10, what's boredom? 0. Information times emotion. If the emotion is 0, what's anything times 0?
0.
And you wonder why you forgot the presidents, the capitals, the periodic table, all the things we learned in school, because the emotion level was very weak.
Wow.
Right? That's why entertainment is so powerful, because education, maybe empowerment is here, entertainment is way up here because of that emotion. But when you can infuse emotion into the learning process, and part of that is human motivation. Because I remember the second question, I was talking to Bill Gates about he's like, reading is what I'd like to be better at. I'm like, I totally could help you with that, because leaders are readers, clearly. And on top of that, I was like, we're talking about the future education, and I was talking about accelerated learning, and he was talking about tools and technology, and a bunch of crowd was building, and they said, what's missing? You have the tools, you have the theory, and we came to the same exact conclusion: motivation. Right? Understanding human motivation. Why can somebody learn something, not apply it? To be able to get that benefit, to be able to execute that. And I have a theory on that we could talk about. Why people procrastinate, why they put things off. But going back to the emotional level, tap into the second H, which is your heart. Now, the A, what I would say in Max Out, as people are going through this, just a simple acronym. The A, I would say, is
I think for someone like me, it's perfect.
And this is, again, we haven't gone into the technique, but just owning
I don't come from...
Because most people are not responsible. They feel like, you know why? It's because we were trained that way.
It's perfect for me because I don't come from a financial background in terms of education and shit. So everything I'm learning is like all new. So the education is great. The licensing is great, just to be able to friggin' have like a license, and there's like a filter, and it's... I'm not a fan of like exclusivity, but I'm a fan of man, to pass the licensing course is really friggin' hard. Like, it's really hard to get the license. And so I mean, I'm at the point of making invites and reaching out and starting to build it, but it's hard for me to, like, I just applied for life insurance a couple days ago. So if I'm approved, it'll just be a lot better to recommend to people. Like me, I don't have any dependents right now, and life is really just for me. But for others that have like a house, we can replace your mortgage insurance with life insurance, and then you get the money, or the beneficiary, or, gets the money instead of like the bank getting it to pay off the mortgage and stuff. So you can do some cool stuff. Right now is a good time to buy stocks and bonds. Like, get into the market, like mutual funds, equity funds. I've learned all of this. I didn't know anything about this. And if you just want to learn, what is it, $100 US, $130 Canadian just to enter and join? Dude, it's fucking amazing. I recommend it. Buy the dip? Yeah, buddy, exactly. Now's the time to buy, right? So maybe not today because the market's kind of still like dropping, but like one thing I learned was over the last 10 to 20 years, like the top 10 to 20 days have been one of the biggest growth factors. So it's like not when to be in the market, it's how long to be in the market. Because you want to be in the market for the long term, for the long run. So let's see how the insurance company is. Let's see what happens with that life insurance, because I mean I'm turning 37 in a couple weeks. So I mean the life insurance, they already consider me 37 because that's just the way it is. So I really want to get it early, which is another selling point. I can convince people to get it early, because even your health might change. You might just get rejected. You might not be able to qualify for it, for the underwriting. Like, I don't know any of this stuff, and so I would highly recommend it. Taste the toxin? What, really? I love Skittles, man. I loved it growing up. It was so bad for my teeth. I loved it though, and now as an adult, it's too much sugar for me. I can't do it. Yeah, that fat Greg, dude. Dude, WSG is amazing. I haven't made a single cent yet, but I mean, like, I have a lot of faith. Not faith, but I've seen a lot of people be really successful and make like a lot of money. It takes time, right? Gotta build it. But I'm getting smarter every day. If I can treat this like a job, which I am, and I have the ability to do that right now. If you don't, like, you can't quit your job yet until maybe, I don't know, like a year or two after. I quit just because I ran away from like vaccine mandate and shit. But like, I don't see people making money within the first 6 months, no matter how smart or hard you work, which is fine, but it doesn't mean it's like you can't, what's it called, because you gotta get licensed first, and unless you're like a genius. In the US it's a lot easier to get licensed. For the States, apparently Canada, you have to write 4 exams you have to pass, and then you have to wait like a month in order to write the provincial exam. It's like a license for life. It's a serious, like, highly reputable license. It's pretty cool. The fees aren't that expensive. I mean, titanium dioxide significantly fade late 30s. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, exactly, man. Titanium dioxide. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. How is it added? Is it in the dye or something, Dick? Yeah. Thanks, man. What's it called? The reason why also is I want the residual income. I want to build a business. You know what I mean? Like, I want to build. I want to help as many people as I can in this world, in this life. I want to talk to as many people. Like, this job is amazing because what do I want to do in this life? What is the number one thing I want to do in this, like, on this earth, is reconnect with all my friends and everyone I've ever known in my entire life. Like, and that's like my job. It's amazing. I gotta convince them. I'm gonna start with friends, obviously, but the goal is kind of like the world, and it's such a different type of philosophy where it's like you're closed in and cold to, wow, I'm on this earth and there's all these people. I have this knowledge. I have the license to provide the ability to purchase this investment option for these people, replace their mortgage insurance. Disconnect from all my folder. No, man, but it's like, you know, and I had this like life. I had this. I almost died in 2016. So this life-threatening injury, and I didn't have life insurance, and so even that's such a great icebreaker. Be like, hey, I had this life-changing, threatening injury all these years ago. I'm half deaf now. All that stuff. We got the scar to prove it. The head injury. Broken skull. Broken occipital. Broken cheekbone. Broken nose. Coma for a day. Intensive care unit for a week and a half. So it's man, we need life insurance, man. So I also got accidental death and dismemberment. Hopefully I'm approved for it. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, my man. I am, my man. It's a miracle, dude. You know the story. 500-pound drum fell on my head off the back of a truck against the concrete. Really terrible. 50-page paper about Plato. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Once upon a time, there was a man named Socrates. Yeah, man, dude, I'm really lucky. I went to Toronto rehab, and they tested my brain, and my brain was really, really strong. They did Mensa tests and shit. It's so lucky. Like, I got so lucky. It's crazy, man. I actually didn't study much Plato. My name comes from Plato, dude. That's sick that you caught that. I think I told you. I don't know if I told you that, or you knew that, or we talked about it. But I know a little bit about Plato. It's just like those guys were so rudimentary. They were like, "What is love? Like, what is society?" What is democracy? Just so rudimentary stuff that no one has ever written down, I guess. So they had to cover a lot of that. But they came up with cool fables and shit. Alright, thanks, man. Why cytotoxic? Titanium dioxide. That's crazy. In the coloring, yeah. Kant, yeah. Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant. I can't remember what he argued. I know he's German. I know he's also very long-winded. Man, I'm kind of like done. Honestly, I might do a couple more. I might do more bench press. I might do one more bicep curl. I might do a little bit of the elliptical. Wow. Titanium dioxide. Telomeres. Crazy. Dick, you know a lot about a lot, man. How do you know so much about like biology and shit? You don't use traditional. Yeah, that's in it. You're right. I use deodorant, but it's not antiperspirant. I use deodorant, but not antiperspirant. So there's no titanium dioxide anything in there. Don't even want to think about Mountain Dew. No, I think it's different. I think it's a little different. I hope. Most brand names have titanium dioxide. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, I'm gonna play the video and I'm gonna go back to typing. I'm still gonna be chatting with you, but I want to type instead. Oh, that's cool. Oh yeah, WFG man. Yo, if you want to join, let me know. I'm not trying to recruit you. Just message me, and I'll hook you up with the person in the United States. It costs like $100 American to join, and then you can choose whether you want to learn to get the license or not. Because I think you can refer people and still make money, or without a license, but the license is it's good. You learn about taxes, you learn about 401ks. Well, in Canada we learn about RSPs, so we learn about the 401ks and what's taxable, what's not. Limits, right? The questions like how much can you put into a 401k every year, how much can you take out, how much tax you pay on it, or whatever. Disability, Social Security, right? What year? You know, if you take out Social Security at like 62, it's whatever, 900 a month, versus if you take it out at 65, 66 is like whatever, 1400 a month or whatever, and all that stuff. And it's cool. You learn a lot, man. But that's the thing. If you come from finances and like financial stint and taxes, it might just be redundant. But I didn't. I came from biology and science. I didn't know anything about this stuff, so it's perfect for me. And the structure is really good. And you can build a business. You can build a multi-level marketing, which is huge because you get all the residual income. It's like once you get like right now, I'm making. Everyone starts off at really low at 25% because you don't know anything. You're not doing any work, so you work the first 10-20 meetings with. Like I'm working first 10-20 meetings with like a millionaire, multi-millionaire earner every year, which is incredible because I referred to him from someone in California miraculously, and he lives in Ottawa. so like he's doing all the work, but then like as I advance, you move up, and the top you can get is 65%, and relative to say an independent broker is 80%, right, or something like that. But the difference is you can't really build a business. You don't get that. Like the analogy is, would you rather have like 80%, like one bowl of 80%, or would you have like 20 or whatever 400 bowls of 65%? You know what I mean? Like it's if you build a big enough, it's way advantageous, way better. That's why you see huge like people like my Latin people, like they're fucking like multi-millionaires. So like if you don't do much work at the beginning, you're not gonna like, it's, you know. But if you work your ass off, it's encouraging. But I haven't made a cent yet, so I can't say anything. Oh my god! I'm gonna tell you now. I'm gonna spill the beans. Next week, me and my girlfriend and her daughter, we're going to Las Vegas for the World Financial Group conference, the convention. Yeah, with the Ottawa team. I'm going, putting it all in debit, on credit. Man. So I might stream in Vegas next week. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not like it's all going on credit, but I'm planning to become very rich in the future. That's my plan. That's what I'm working towards. And this is the first step towards that. I don't think I'm gonna go every year. I don't think I'm gonna go next year. Maybe, probably not. I don't know. If I get rich, yes, but It's gonna take time. But I think the more I get, what's it called? Comfortable. What's the word? The more I do it, the more I sell it, the more I'll be like to people like, hey, you really need this. All right. Thanks, man. Hope you're doing well, man. just stop eating Skittles, Dick, man. Like, what's you're freaking out? Are you a big Skittles man? You're right. Like, I'm not saying like they shouldn't do that. The globalists trying to put all the poisons in our food. Yeah, I didn't think so, man.
Cars with Tesla. He's building electric cars and spaceships going to Mars, right? But the vehicle of choice for education is like a horse and buggy. How people learn is like a horse and carriage, and you wonder why you're falling behind. Right. And here's why. We all grew up with the 20th century education. 20th century education prepares for a 20th century world. And at the turn of the century, it was working in farms and factories. Yeah. And here's the thing, it trained us just to consume information. A teacher would lecture and you would just consume information.
Yes.
But the human brain does not learn through consumption, it learns through creation. Isn't it interesting that school will teach you what to learn, math, history, science, but important subjects basically, but not how to learn. What were the classes on creativity, imagination, strategy, problem solving, entrepreneurship, critical thinking, right? Yeah. Where was the classes on listening, on emotional intelligence? Where were the classes on speed reading? Where were the classes on remembering, right? Socrates says learning is remembering. Because nobody, like when I was at Google, they're like, Jim, but we have a search engine. Why do we need to retain all this information? Here's the reason, is because, I'll give you a couple of reasons. Number one, your brain is like a muscle. It's use it or lose it. But people are suffering from digital dementia. This is the new term in healthcare.
Digital dementia.
Digital dementia, where we're so dependent on our smart devices. It keeps our to-dos. It does simple math for us. Yeah. I went to dinner the other night, and it was 10 of us, literally 10 of us. The waiter comes with the check, and half of the 10 people pulled out their phones to divide the check by 10.
Yes.
And if people are listening to this, they don't understand why that's a problem, then that's the problem. That's the problem. Right? Because all you have to do is just move it, the decimal just one over. But we've been so dependent on it. So digital dementia is saying we're so dependent on technology that we're not using this technology anymore. Man. Like how many phone numbers did you know growing up?
That's an amazing question. I was thinking,
how many?
I don't know my wife and children's phone number right now. And I can tell you, I know my best friend's parents' phone number from when I was 7 years old.
Isn't that insane? And I'm not suggesting people, I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, but we've lost the ability to remember one. Because entrepreneurs, you want your freedom, right? You set your life for freedom, but if you can't get yourself to do the things, then you don't have freedom.
It's the rub.
Right? Exactly. It's the rub. And that's the thing, that's the paradox. If you just do the easy things in life, you procrastinate, you put things off, right? Then life is hard. But if you do the hard things in life, life becomes easy. Wow, so good. And because you're building those muscles. And what I'm suggesting is mental fitness is as important as mental intelligence. The X is exercise. Okay. Exercise. And here's the thing, physical exercise, good for your brain. Okay. We know this across the board.
Physical exercise, good for the brain.
But so people who are more mentally, who work out, they're more mentally fit, right? They do better on focus, mental acuity, memory tests. They create, when you exercise, you create brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is like BDNF, fertilizer for the brain, which promotes neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, new brain cells, new connective. People say like when they listen to your show, if they're doing on an elliptical, something rhythmic, or they're going for a walk, they'll retain it better.
Wow.
Right? Which is so powerful just in being creative, going for walks. Like Steve Jobs, all his meetings were walking meetings, right? Because that's when all the creativity is coming out. So movement, because we live in such a sedentary environment.
Is that what you mean by learning is state-driven too?
Exactly, because movement changes your state. Your physiology affects your psychology. And we live in a culture where sitting is the new smoking. We've all heard this, and we're not moving. The primary reason why you have a brain is to control your movement. People don't realize that. Number one reason you have a brain. And as your body moves, your brain grooves. As your body moves, your brain grooves. Even the episode I did on morning routine, the 11 things I do every single morning, my routine is basically focused around jumpstarting your brain. The science of momentum.
Can we say one thing about that where we both agree, and you know the reasons better than I? We're both big. Don't check your phone for a window of time. Just, I know we're going to sidetrack here, but this is a road worth going down just for 30 seconds. Tell them what you think about that when they wake up.
And I know you're an advocate for this also. That if you want to win the day, you got to win that first half an hour, hour of the day, right? But the worst thing you could do, everybody should, has their to-do list. You should have a not to-do list. And the top thing, that's what successful people do. Because that's the thing, as you become more successful, there's this opportunity stress, right? You get more and more invitations to do more and more things. So you have to say no to good, so you can say yes to great. And what helps is having a not to-do list. And on top of the not to-do list, I would suggest don't touch your phone the first half an hour or an hour of the day, and the last half an hour and the hour of the day. Why? Because when you wake up first thing in the morning from a brain reason, you're in this alpha theta state. You're extremely suggestible. That's when you're most creative, right? And you're incredibly suggestible. And if you pick up your phone, you're rewiring your brain for a number of things. Number one, you're training it for distraction. Every dopamine, like every like, share, comment, cat video, gives you a dopamine flood, and you wonder why you can't focus because you're trained to be distracted. Number two, by the way, on my show I had Dr. BJ Fogg, and he runs the Influence Persuasion Lab in Stanford University. And one of his students co-founded Instagram. The average person, I read recently, the average person opens up Instagram 150 times a day. So it's addictive, right? And if you're picking up, here's the thing I have with technology. When you pick it up out of habit, like not for purpose, but just out of habit, technology is a tool you're supposed to use, right? Like exactly. And when technology is using you, who becomes the tool?
Wow.
Right?
So
we become the tool. And here's number one, you don't pick up your phone first thing, it trains you to be distracted. Number two, when you're in that impressionable state, is what you talk about. It trains you to be reactive.
Correct.
It trains you to be reactive. All of a sudden, you get one email, one voicemail message, it ruins your day, and we've all had that. It just, you're fighting fires and you're on the defense. How can you build an incredible day with vision and leadership if you're just reacting?
Well, I wanted you to defend, not defend is the wrong word, I wanted you to back that up with brain power, which is that you're literally training your brain to be a reactive
rewiring your brain for distraction and reaction in that impressionable alpha suggestible.
By the way, when we're talking about alpha theta states, everybody's going to go above for a few people, but I just want to stay in there. There's different brain states that you're going to be in. And it is also true that most people have a proclivity to wake up in a more worried state as well. And part of that is, I think it's the theta state. And when you're in theta, you're in a state where you have the potential to be worrying more deeply than in other brain states. That's true, correct?
So here's the thing. There are four primary states, brainwave states that we cycle through. Beta is when you're most awake and alert. We're in beta right now. Delta is the slowest state. Obviously, you're asleep. That's a sleeping state. Right below beta is a state called alpha. This is, I would describe it as a relaxed state of awareness. This is where your conscious mind metaphorically is set aside and you're just absorbing information. This is a great state to learn in. When we train people to learn languages faster, we put them into an alpha state. And you could do it through visualization, you could do it through deep breathing exercises, you could do it through Baroque classical music. There's certain classical music that put you in a relaxed state of awareness. An alpha state is actually, if you work with a great hypnotherapist, they'll get you to change your beliefs or your anxiety, test anxiety or public speaking anxiety by putting you in alpha state through visualization, deep breathing, right? Through soft nature music, whatever it is. They'll put you in alpha state and then they'll give you new things to say to yourself that you'll readily accept because your conscious mind is set aside, which is really the critic, the squelcher. Below that is the state of theta. Between alpha and delta is the state of theta. So this state, what you're talking about worry, absolutely, because this is the state of creativity, right? You know what puts you into a theta state? Showers. Have you ever noticed when you're taking a shower, you come up with all these great ideas? It's always when you can't write something down, right? Or you teach people how to memorize it. I actually took 6 showers this morning just to prepare for this interview, so I can be extremely creative, right? So awesome. the water washing over puts you into that really relaxed state where you become extremely creative. I was working with Will Smith, and again, I'm saying these names not to just name drop, but because they become memory reminders and triggers. Because if I just talk about Bill Smith, you'll forget the story. But if I say Will Smith, next time you see, his movie, it'll trigger that. So we were in Toronto, and he was filming from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I was like, how do you do this? Like 2 a.m. in the morning, you're just waiting. And then director says, okay, let's do it. How do you get prepared? How do you get ready? He was like, Jim, I don't have to get ready. I stay ready.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, wow, because you do the work. I believe, Ed, like you, that ultimately the life you live are the lessons you teach. The O in max out stands for observation. A lot of people say, I have a horrible memory, and they blame their retention. It's not your retention, it's your attention. You know, the story I tell is
come on, that was
the
great.
second time I got to meet President Bill Clinton, and regardless of people's political ideology, everyone would agree he's got a lot of charisma. He's a great connector, a great communicator.
Absolutely.
What people don't know, he's got an incredible memory. Incredible memory. The first time I met him was very, very brief, but the second time he remembered my name, and I was like, okay. He was fed that by security. And then he remembered our last conversation. I was like, nobody was there. He definitely remembers this. And I was like, I'm the memory guy. How do you do this? What memory technique are you using? Because I believe genius leaves clues. And he tells me these stories about his grandfather in Arkansas in the living room, telling the grandkids all these stories, but he would do something different. Afterwards, he would quiz every single one of them to see if they're really paying attention. And I was like, wow, that's really, we went deep in that rabbit hole. And I would notice when he was explaining this to me, we're at a fundraiser, it's 2,000 people, and I was sitting right next to him at dinner. And it was like me, Forrest Whitaker, who won the Academy Award, Richard Branson, Ashton Kutcher, Ashton Kutcher's twin brother. I put this on Facebook.
I've seen that
crazy.
Pictures. Yeah.
But I was like this, when he's talking to me, he's like, there's a lot more important people in that room, certainly at that table, but I feel like I'm the only one, Ed. And this is a quality that you have. I can feel this because I believe, you go to events, you were talking about remembering names, and they're looking over your shoulder.
Yes.
And like, who else is important in this room? And and everyone feels, especially women, they feel like when your attention goes somewhere else, they know it right away.
Yes.
Or if it's not being distracted outside, they're not paying attention because what are they doing? They're not listening. They're waiting for their turn to speak, or they're thinking how they're going to respond. Right? Another habit of highly effective people: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Most people, they want to be understood, and they're thinking about all that, and they're not
so powerful.
And they're not interested. They're just trying to be interesting.
Oh my gosh. They're trying to be interesting. They're not interested. That's powerful. Let's just slow that down a little bit. The people whose company I enjoy the most, who are some of the most influential people I've ever met, have that exact skill set that you just described. They're less interested in being interesting, and they are more interested in you. That is 100,000% true.
And Ed, just an explanation more, like they're present with you. You know what I mean? Like you are. Since I walked through this door, you're there, and that's a trained skill.
Sure.
Listen, if you write the word "listen" on your phone or just in your notes, and then scramble the letters, it spells another word perfectly. It spells the word silent. And most people, they're not silent. They're talking to themselves and they're distracting. And if you're talking to yourself and listening to a new person talk, you can't listen to two conversations at once. You can't multitask. And by the way, just as a side note, there's a myth to multitasking. Everybody, I just have to address this.
I know.
Yeah, because, and you know this, the science is saying, everyone who thinks you're doing two cognitive activities, I'm not talking about riding a bike and chewing gum. I'm talking about two cognitive activities, you're not really doing it. It's called task switching. That when you go from one thing to another, you're making more mistakes, science has shown this, you're making more errors, and you're wasting time. It takes anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes to regain your focus and your flow. What do? You hydrate because your brain's mostly water. Even a 2 or 3% decrease in water in your brain could reduce your reaction time, your thinking ability. When you're fully hydrated, it boosts like 30% reaction time, thinking. Hydrate, and then breathe, deep breathing, right? Get those 6 deep breaths in. And actually, to create neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, to literally just get smarter, you need 2 things: novelty and nutrition. Just like if you want to build your body, you give it novelty, you work it out, and then you give it nutrition, you feed it, and then you rest. Because the rest is really important, because that's where you consolidate short to long-term memory. So the O is observation, the U, I would go to use. And I'm doing this on the spot because I know these are the principles, but I would say, to remember a name, use the name in the conversation. Right? So somebody introduces themselves and you get it and you say it and you use it because you want to make sure you heard it right. You don't want to have a conversation with Ed and say goodbye, Ted. Right? Because some people, you're at a wedding, you're at an event, it's loud, you get distracted. Better to be corrected in the beginning. And then I'm not going to say, use it a million times. Ed, you have a beautiful home. Ed, what do you want to talk about? Ed, what do you that's abuse.
Yep.
But use it 3 or 4 times in the conversation. Now, in the context of non-remembering names, use it, because anything you learn, if you want to learn it better, right? If you want to max out with your ability to apply, then you want to always think about, how do I use this obsessively? When you're reading something, how can I use this? When you're listening to podcasts, how can I use this instantly, right? So even people listening to this could be thinking, okay, I have this event tonight, or I have this event tomorrow. How am I going to use this, right? So you're going to use it. And then finally, the T in max out, I would say teach. You know, intent matters. Intent matters. And what I would suggest everybody do, and I would challenge everyone who's listening to do this, because with challenge comes the change that you need, right? I would challenge everybody who's listening, if you're really serious, to use this and not just be like, oh, that was an entertaining show. I would say, think about somebody you wish was listening to this right now, and let's say you had to teach them tomorrow, or teach them, or give a TED presentation on Monday about the things. If you were to learn with the intention of teaching, would you focus better? Would you take better notes? Would you ask better questions on social media, right? You would own that information. And so when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. When you teach something, you get to learn it twice. You know, when we grew up and we heard that phrase, those who can't do teach, you can't do, you know, business, so teach it in business school. You know, yes, there's a certain truth, but then also I always thought it wasn't a negative. I was like, wow, if I can't do it, teach it, and then I could do it. You know, I could get better at it, because when you teach it, you own it, it becomes you. You're not using their words, you're using your words, and it becomes, you know, who you are.
About 20 years ago, I got into the space of teaching people, and so since that time, everything I've listened to related to these topics, everything I've read, every seminar I've attended was with the intention to teach it.
That's beautiful.
It's exactly what you just said. So I'm getting a double whammy every single time on all of these today. And having you here, I'm listening with the intent to teach these things.
And you because it becomes you, and then that's a double benefit, double whammy, because why learn anything? Number one, so you could benefit from it, but why learn it also? So people you care about can benefit too. I always believe is you learn to earn to return.
Oh, that's so good.
You learn, and then with the learning comes earning, and then you could return. You could pay it forward.
That's brilliant.
Let me address one thing about IQ, because I know.
I know. I saw your face when I said it, so I know
you're
giving it to.
I just have to, because I have to, as your friend, I just want to make sure the standard is set for all of us, because we all need that coaching. It's just, I believe there's a myth that IQ is. I don't think it has the value that people give to it. The IQ, the two issues I have with IQ is, number one, it's saying that when you take this test, whether you're 6 or 60, it's going to be the same and it's fixed. And I do not believe that.
We've proven that. That's not true.
I literally could show anybody how to do better on it, because it's just how to learn things, right? So I could show people how to game that. But the other thing is, I don't think IQ is an accurate measure of intelligence, because even when you look at standardized tests, you know, when we grew up, we took the SATs, right? And what was that? Verbal and mathematical. Now, that test was like everything. It's like how you go to college and get a good job and everything else like that, right?
My son's studying right now.
Exactly. But here's the thing, that measures verbal intelligence and mathematical intelligence. It's important, but it's also saying like that's all that's important. And there's this theory out of Harvard called multiple intelligence theory by Howard Gardner, saying there are way more intelligences, right? And so what about visual spatial intelligence? People who are great artists, or architects, right? Or like the visual spatial graphic designers, right? That's just as important as anything else, right? So what it's saying is you could improve this, and there are other intelligence that are equally.
That's what you said earlier about there being multiple geniuses.
Exactly.
LeBron James' genius is different than Steve Jobs' genius. They're both geniuses.
So kinesthetic intelligence.
Right. If you're listening to this, please fall in love with your own genius, your own giftedness, your own brilliance, because you have it. And because it may not be math skills, or it may not be having a deep voice where you have a great ability to articulate thoughts. You've got all of these other, I think there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of types of intelligence and genius. Because we all meet magic people all the time. And what makes you interesting and special is that's your magic. It's different than somebody else's.
And I always do believe there's a method behind the magic. And you know, my life's work is seeing somebody who exhibits that and finding out that, hey, this is also available because we can learn this.
It's a skill.
Because when did you learn interpersonal intelligence? When in school do they teach that?
Right. I certainly wasn't born with it.
And here's the question people say about their kids, about themselves, about their team. It's like how smart they are. They want to know how smart somebody is, but that's the wrong question. Remember, questions are the answer. It's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart.
Oh gosh, that's so good.
It's not how smart your kids are, your team is, or anybody else. It's how are you smart, because you're right, there are multiple intelligence, there are multiple ways you could be a genius.
That's brilliant. I want to share something with you, because it just happened this weekend, and from my folks here too, I think one of mine is that I am present with people.
Yeah.
And I do observe people. And so it's really interesting, because I think that's one of the things that I love about doing the show. And it was fascinating because I never gave any thought as to where that came from, because your brain brilliance comes from the fact that you had this damaged brain as a child. Yet it's one of your great gifts and one of the great things you're intelligent at, one of your geniuses. And so this weekend somebody had asked me, why do you think, like on your show, or even we were at a dinner, you're so present, you're listening. Where do you think that comes from? And I didn't know. I thought about it, and I said, I'm not sure, but it's interesting. My dad's sober 30 years now, but when I was a little boy, my dad had a drinking problem. And I never knew as a little boy which dad was going to come through the front door at night. And so unlike most kids who would run up and hug dad, I would observe dad when he came home. And so when dad walked through the front door, I'd look at his physiology, I'd look at his eyes, his face, his lips. I'd listen to what his first few words were. And I think since I was about a 4-year-old little boy, I was sort of, through that unfortunate circumstance in my family, I developed this intelligence of being present and really being with someone and understanding them and connecting with them and seeing where they really were. And it's ended up serving me as a 47-year-old man with you here today.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? And so for some of you listening, I would just say to you that sometimes some of your great genius could be coming from some of what you would think might be some of the more tragic events in your life or difficult events.
Yo, thanks for being here. I'm sign off now.
And the self-talk also, when I said,
thanks, Dick.
at age 9, a teacher looked at me and said, that's the boy with the broken brain.
Pleasant
For the whole
Ostrich.
class.
Thanks, everybody.
And parents and adults have to be very careful, because your external words become a child's internal words. Because every single time I did bad on a quiz, on a test, or not picked for a sports team, which was all the time, I would say, because I had the broken brain. That became my internal conversation. And I always tell people when they come to me and they say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I have a horrible memory. I always say, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If you fight for your limitations, you argue for your limits, they're yours, right? And here's the thing, your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet, because you program your supercomputer not to. They say the two most powerful words in the English language are also the smallest, I am. Because whatever you put after that, complete that sentence with, is going to determine your destination, your destiny.
Your brain is like
you're saying this, because this is typically said
your
by
brain is like a supercomputer.
You know what I mean? By motivational people or inspiring people. Now we've got a brain person, science telling you this is a fact.
So your identity is this. So let's say at a simple level, let's say people want to change their behavior, they want to stop procrastinating.
Yes.
But their identity is, I'm a procrastinator.
Yes.
Ooh, that's going to be a tough one. Yep. They want to change a behavior like, I want to stop smoking. But their identity is, I am a smoker. Wow, that's going to be a challenge, right? So here's the thing. The reason why I bring these distinctions up is because it takes the self-loathing or the judgment out of it, because you don't have to, if you're not good at something, you could say like, you could address the level that's holding you back. Finally, below the level of behavior, this is a big one, is the environment, the level of environment, because
the only beef there should be in the world
the behavior
is
you want to stop smoking, but the environment is you're around a lot of smokers. Because it's not, here's the thing, the people you spend time with, these people you know this, you teach this, because your mirror neurons are always imitating what's around you. And that's the thing. So I want to sensitize you to, because often the people that hold us back are the people that love us the most.
You nailed it.
Because you know why? They're like, you're going to another event, you're listening to another podcast, why are you reading another book, spending all that money? And they can have good intentions. Right? Because ultimately people are doing things for, generally I believe for good reasons.
Most people.
But they can be sincere, but they can be sincerely wrong.
Sincerely wrong, and I love the "I'm not this yet."
Right.
I also want to just repeat things that you say brilliant things one after the other, and so this idea that as a parent your external dialogue becomes your child's internal dialogue is just riveting. I mean, it's riveting, and it's also true, I think, of leaders and companies too. Your external dialogue about your company or about that individual can become their internal dialogue. So what you're saying matters so deeply.
There are 6 primary questions we learned in school. 5 W's and 1 H, right?
Okay.
Now watch this. The identity level answers the question of who. The beliefs and values answer the question of why. The capabilities answer the question of how you do it. The behavior is the what,